You are the founder of the Black Guns Matter movement. What is the Black Guns Matter movement about? When did it start? And what inspired you to create this organization?
Yeah, we started in about 2015, going into 2016. Uh, at that time, the presidential election, as of like right now, was ramping up. We kept hearing, we need a voters registration drive. We need a voters registration drive. And I'm like, man, we need to get the people armed drive. And so, you know, we started as one event. And that event wound up turning into so many people coming. And then so many people came and we were like, okay, we did it. And so many of those people were like, yo, man, I live in New York, New Jersey, all of these places. They were missing so much information. So then we decided, yo, let's do a GoFundMe. Let's have $25,000 and let's just do 13 cities. And then we wound up doing those 13 cities. And then everybody just kept hitting us up. Hey, man, you got to come to this city. You got to come to that city. So what we do is we crowdfund and give free classes to anyone that wants to learn basic firearm knowledge, conflict resolution, de-escalation. And in turn, that turns into almost a political education class, because when you start to see the level of politics involved in gun control, which was initially created to stop melanated beings from having the means to defend themselves, you start to see that your voting choices become very different. So we continue to do that. Like I said, we had one class today in Charleston, South Carolina. We just want Black people, all people, but more specifically Black people, because gun control was literally created to stop Black people from having the means to defend themselves with firearms. We want Black people to be armed, be safe, and be responsible gun owners, and then make political decisions that are in alignment with protecting that right.
So let's start a little bit backwards, because this is an African audience that's going to be watching this video. So what does the Second Amendment say, and what was the Second Amendment created for?
The Second Amendment, upon its creation in America let's be clear, the founding fathers to this nation had serious contradictions, a lot of them. You can't say Thomas Jefferson wrote, the Declaration of Independence, but he owned humans. So that's a clear contradiction. And as a melanated being, I have to be honest about that. I love where I live. I love my people. I love my countrymen, my countrywomen, but we have to be honest about our history. So that was written by a group of men that when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights was a enumerated list of rights that you have as a human that are granted by your creator, not by government, and cannot be taken away by government. Those are the founding documents that make up the framework of America. That is the supreme law of the land, based on natural law, the human right to defend self. The Second Amendment in that Bill of Rights says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, meaning the people have the individual right to keep and bear arms to protect themselves from violence, death, assailants, and government corruption. It was written for the people to protect themselves from the government. And I think a lot of times that part gets taken out, especially when it's presented to Black communities in America. It's made as if, when that was written, it wasn't for you. It wasn't for Black people. I don't care what it was written for. And that's not true, because it was human nature codified, not granted by government, not taken away by government. And I don't care if somebody intended to mean me in that. I don't care about their intent. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. I know that these are things that, brothers, it's a human right. All countries have it. All humanity has it. We've just allowed, on a global scale, especially, we've allowed government to control more than the people. And America is one of the last stands for that type of individual liberty and freedom in regards to how the government chooses who can have and maintain firearms. And so the reason why the Second Amendment is so important is because it literally is the means of people, humans, to put their government in check. And to know that that is there, to know that someone would create gun control to stop melanated beings from having the means to defend themselves from citizens and the government is more of the reason why we have to be more, pick up the mantle and utilize that for our individual selves, families, and communities.
So I want to ask, there's something that you've said a few times, and I want to ask you to unpack it a little bit. What is the basis for the argument that gun control has been introduced to prevent Black ownership or melanated ownership, as you would say, of guns? So it seems like it does exist in most of the states, but it exists in different forms, because I understand there's right to carry. You have, in some states you can conceal the weapon, in some states you can't conceal the weapon, and in some states you can own it in the home or something to that effect. But what is the basis of you saying that they introduced these laws to prevent Black people from owning guns in mass?
So gun control in America, the first law, so go back, something you said was key. Some states have what's called constitutional carry, which means you can carry a firearm. Like right now, I have a firearm on me concealed, right? Some states that's lawful. Yeah. When you're talking about on the state level, not including the Constitution, right? Just individual states. At one point, all of America was constitutional carry, which means if you can lawfully purchase a firearm, you can have it, carry it open or concealed or whatever you choose. The first rules in Virginia were under what was called the Black Codes, meaning a set of rules specifically aimed at Black people, not just Black meaning like African Americans, but people of color, melanated beings. If a white person saw a Black person that had something that appeared to be a firearm, they were within their rights to stop and or shoot that person. So the first rules, when the rule was everyone can have a gun, just don't shoot anybody unjustifiably. You can conceal it or not. The entire country was constitutional carry. The first rules were except for the Black people. This continued, and over time, you know, racism is a great book by Michelle Alexander called The New Jim Crow, which deals with the prison industrial complex and the racism involved in it. What she said in that book was racism is very smart. It adapts. So now it's not politically correct to say what they said back then. Hey, you Black people, we don't want you to have guns. We're going to make rules where it's illegal for you to have a gun. Similar to it was illegal to teach Black people to read. Now that that's not politically correct, they'll change it and say, oh, it's fees. You have to spend this much amount of money to take the test. In Boston, for example, it costs $100 to take the test. And even if you pass the test, the state may say, we still are not going to issue you a license to carry. They do that primarily in areas and communities of color. So it changes, it adapts. So the origin, the manifestation, the origin, the expansion, the evolution and adaptation of gun control in America, even though it still inculcates other beings, the center of the scope, per se, has been and is Black people. Black and brown people in America are most negatively impacted by gun laws. I don't mean guys that rob, rape, or kill, just having the gun. You know, just having it crossing one state imaginary line from one state to another where it's lawful, and now it's not. Black and brown people are impacted negatively by that more than anyone. And these things are wrong. And it is not only a contradiction, but it's an exact opposition to the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States and doubled down by the Bill of Rights.
All right, that I think there've been a few rappers who have been caught up in the being caught with firearms having crossed into one state or another. Maybe T.I. was one of those. I want to ask though, I'm thinking about guns broadly here, and I'm not somebody who's considered gun ownership. I'm not somebody who has viewed myself as necessarily capable or wanting to have a gun in my space because it's so dangerous to have one. And I want to ask the question, it seems as if there's so much gun violence in America. I was thinking as you were speaking, that we've heard all of the stories about Chicago and the violence in some of the, is it downtown or uptown? I'm not sure which is which. The communities there where there's a lot of gang-related shootings. And this is popularized in some of the popular culture. You'll hear Kanye West talking about it. You'll hear, some movies. Even Spike Lee did one, which I thought was maybe not as serious as it should have been, considering the matter that it was dealing with. But the same applies to Harlem. The same applies to Compton. We'll hear a lot about gun violence. I mean, we've seen Menace to Society. We've seen Boys in the Hood. So this is I'm giving you how we have, as a global community, received the gun conversation. And more recently, we've seen these mass shootings, and it doesn't seem as if there's a strong case, aside from the moral case, which I think you established quite well, to say, listen, we've got this amendment that was put into the Constitution by the founding fathers to make sure you have protection from the state, from thugs, from criminals, and all of this. And maybe I shouldn't even use the word thugs, just say you criminals, so that we don't use a racialized tone or word. But that case, I think you win. But what about the gun usage just in America?
So the stories that you're usually hearing are false. One, so let's start, that's a lot to unpack. Let's start with mass shootings. You got to look at the definition of the word first. A mass shooting is by their definition, a shooting where 4 or more people are shot or killed, seemingly unrelated, right? So under that definition, even though it's not used, if there's a shootout in an urban or Black community, that fits the definition of a mass shooting. Even with that, those shootings make up less than 1% of all shootings in America. 60% of death in America related to firearms are suicides. So the 30 or 40,000 deaths annually, 60% of that is suicide. This speaks again to the culture and morality of us not engaging people, and they're using a tool that works, as unfortunate as it is for their life and for their family members who, when they're gone, the tool works and they want the pain to stop. So they use a tool that works. 60% is an overwhelming number, but that part of the conversation is not talked about or sensationalized. The other part, the mass shoot or the gang violence or, urban gun violence, right? Those are usually overwhelmingly in places that have the most gun control laws. Dr. John Lott wrote a great book called More Guns, Less Crime, where he did a decade-long study of the rules, the places that have less respect or less, to use your word, moral understanding or appreciation for the Second Amendment, as well as good gun culture. What follows that culture is gun control. Those areas never educate around firearm safety, more negligent discharges, more gun violence, for lack of a better term, because the culture is wrong. The areas that have more of a respect for the Second Amendment and less restrictive gun rules have less violent crime, historically, all over America. The last point that won't usually get presented either is over the last 10 years, as licenses to carry have been increasing, over the last decade, all across America, violent crime has been decreasing. There are hot pockets. Again, those hot pockets are areas that do not have a respect for firearms. All of the top 4 areas in America last year that had the most homicides in regards to firearms all have very restrictive gun laws because the bad guys don't care about the rules. They don't care. I'm a bad guy. It doesn't matter, you know? So it's a double bubble there. You have places that don't have the best gun laws, but have good gun culture, like Texas. Texas, by no stretch of the imagination, has a lot of freedom in regards to gun laws, but they have good respect for gun ownership. Violent crimes in Texas are not the same as Chicago, as Detroit, as New York, as New Orleans, as St. Louis. You know, the other part of that is the areas, those blue or Democratic controlled cities, sometimes are in red or Republican states. The areas that have the most crime are the blue areas with more gun controls. And as you get out of the cities that have less restrictions and more red places where there's more gun ownership, the violent crime drops. Again, for anyone watching, More Guns, Less Crime by Dr. John Lott breaks this down beautifully, beautifully. And so the narrative that, you know, in my RV right now, there's about 10 guns. Nobody got shot. Nobody's going to get shot, that we're going to be safe and we're going to be responsible. The narrative that gun ownership is dangerous is a false narrative. What is dangerous is if people purchase firearms and do not, upon themselves, not mandated, take it upon themselves to get proper firearm safety knowledge, training, and safe and train and be informed on safe and responsible handling and storage. A perfect example of when this has not happened properly was a few days ago. There's a hip hop artist here, YFN Lucci. There's a video circulating on Instagram. There's him on a video shoot with a green screen, and he has a rifle, and he's waving it around. He has no idea. He never checked clear to see if the firearm was clear or not. And fortunately, he's pointing at the ground, and he had his finger in the trigger guard. He squeezes the trigger, and the round goes off. That is against every one of the basic firearm safety rules that every gun owner that takes it seriously ingrains into their minds. So not having a gun is A, in opposition to the framework of America. B, statistically, those areas that have less respect for the Second Amendment, the supreme law of the land, have more violence, more gun violence, as well as the areas that have consistently begun to get people to be licensed and be safe and responsible across the nation. Those areas have decreased in violent crime. Lastly, the part that is left out a whole bunch of times is annually, based on the last stats, where I think maybe 2016 or 2017, there are 3 to 5 million defensive gun usages annually, meaning most of them non-lethal, meaning a good person uses a firearm to defend life and prevent crime. 3 to 5 million times that are reported annually in America. So that means if there's 40,000 deaths, 60,000 of them are suicides. The vast majority of those are gang related. In that 40,000, if a police officer shoots a bad guy, they count that as gun violence. So even with all of that in those statistics, you still come up with the number on average 30 to 40,000 deaths a year. There's 3 to 5 million times a year that someone uses a firearm, most non-lethal, to defend life. So the number of people using guns for positive intent and good outcomes far outweighs, even with their corrupt stat game, it far outweighs a bunch of times the amount of times firearms are used to take life. And I think when we look at that bigger picture, it paints a different picture for the rest of the world and the global community.
All right. So I'm sure we're going to try to link the stats so that people can verify that. But I want to ask you about two, I think they're related questions. Number one is in the 60%, right? You say 60% is suicide, right? it has me thinking that that's a mental health issue. And the mental
Correct.
health issue comes up quite a lot in the discussions of, the mass shooters who have gained media prominence, whether it's Christchurch shooting or other events of that nature where people were killed in mass by somebody carrying a weapon. I want to ask, is checking for mental health something that you would co-sign? And if so, isn't that a form of gun control in and of itself? Because if you're opposed to the control, wouldn't you be? So that's one, just keep that in mind, the mental question. The other one is around the nature of the weapons, because a lot of the debate has covered these military grade weapons, which look like they could be used in warfares and small wars in Africa or big wars in Africa. But on the one hand, why is that ownership necessary? And also, what about this bump stock issue, which was something that came up a bit? Where do you guys stand as Black Guns Matter on those issues? Or even not to put the organization on the spot, what do you think about those things?
So the mental health part is absolutely 100% accurate. If you have young people, by and large, who feel hopeless, who, with all of this opportunity around, there is racism around, but there's far more opportunity. I mean, just in life. Like, I focus more on the positives than the negatives. You got your limbs. There's somebody worse off than you. That's my general take on how I move through life. Not to deny or try to negate the reality-based systemic issues, because I got to add that in there. Yeah. I hate when people try, like, because you're focusing on the positive, that you're somehow trying to delude or pretend that the negative systemic issues don't exist. Both can be true. Now, the mental health component, when you're leaving groups of people that feel left out of the so-called American dream, when you've pumped people with big pharmaceuticals and chemicals, most people don't even know any of the chemicals that they ingest daily. And you have adverse effects. Sugar is 6 times more addictive than cocaine. When you have these things around in abundance and there's no education around them, and people become depressed or lethargic or mentally debilitated, and they become depressed, and you go to the doctor and they issue you more prescription level strength drugs, that can create a problem. And I think as gun owners, for Black Guns Matter, we partnered with Walk the Talk America, which is a Second Amendment organization it's a mental health organization with a major focus in the Second Amendment and gun community. There are 22 veterans in America that commit suicide annually on average. That mental health issue is real. America has this myth, especially in the Black community, that we don't go to therapy. That's dumb. That's stupid. Especially when you have a high cholesterol, bad diet, and you're overdrugged. That's dumb. So it absolutely is a major part of that problem. Now, what I have to be careful of is politicians attempting to use that, as you said, as another form of control. These vague terms, I don't want anyone to have a firearm that is unsafe, mentally unsafe, physically unsafe. You need to make sure that you're safe and be responsible with these rights and freedoms that you have. Any safe and responsible gun owner will give that same statement. What we're cautious of is the manipulation by media to give a vague definition of what mental health means. Or to say, if you seek therapy because you're feeling a little bit depressed, oh, we need to come get your guns now. I don't trust government one bit at all. And I don't believe that they would be altruistic in their means of help people with mental illness to not utilize that to try to do a backdoor to more gun control. So for example, in America, cannabis is legal in a lot of states. It is still a federal offense, Schedule 1, next to heroin on a national level. So clearly, marijuana, cannabis, and heroin are not the same, clearly. But it's still a issue that they'll say, if you have a lawful medical marijuana card or cannabis card, you can't purchase and own firearms. So that's the type of thing that we want to prevent against. If someone takes the time to check themselves out because they're depressed, we don't want government to go in and say, well, you were depressed, so that's a mental health issue, so now you can't have a gun. You know, and what happens then is we dissuade people from getting themselves checked out, from looking into, hey, I'm depressed, I want to go talk to somebody, I want to take therapy. Being depressed or having a mental issue does not mean you are a psychopath. And I think we have to stop with that narrative. And I do not trust politicians to utilize that for good. I think it's our responsibility, not by mandate, it's our responsibility, especially as gun owners, to make that our fight. So people that do want to disarm Black and brown people, especially, but not limited to, they can't take that mantle and use it against us. So that's the part in regards to how me as an individual and my organization stands in regards to government involvement with mental health and as it relates to the Second Amendment. Last issue, the bump stocks. I have bump stocks. They're novelty items, but they're my property. And having government tell you what you can or cannot have and not trying to buy it back for me at the price that I set is a contradiction. I completely disagree with the Trump administration in that layout. I think that it's an infringement. I don't care if it's a novelty item. I don't care. Some people say, well, you don't need a bump stock. And some people will say, well, you don't need, this magazine right here holds 15 rounds. If I was in New Jersey right now, I would be breaking the law because they say your gun can only have 10 rounds. But usually in home invasions or robberies, it's usually 2 or more armed people that all are armed, and they're not following that 10 magazine rule. So the bump stock thing is an infringement based on people that either are unaware of how firearms work, how defensive gun usages work, or someone that deliberately feels as if the people should not have arms and only the government should. Both are incorrect. Both are unconstitutional, and both are in direct opposition on the opposite end of the spectrum of the framework of the supreme law of these United States of America. So our organization does not support any gun control measures. We do if someone uses a firearm, no different than a knife. I'm about to go to a restaurant. If somebody pulls out a butter knife and starts stabbing people, I'm going to shoot him, and he's going to go to jail if I don't stop the threat totally. But we're not going to ban butter knives at restaurants. You know, I think that you have to be responsible with your freedoms. And if you are not, and it leads to someone unjustifiably dying, I want you to have your day in court. I want you to have a jury of your peers. I want you to get convicted, and I want you to go to jail. After you come home from jail, you've paid your debt to society. I want you to get right back to all of the rights that you had before you went to jail. So those infringements via bump stock and those potential infringements via wording, vague wording that politicians tend to use to utilize or weaponize mental health issues as a gun control measure, we are in complete opposition to that.
All right, that makes sense. I want to ask you, because you're in a charged political environment and the NRA is identified as one of the organizations that is sustaining, gun freedoms, and some people would say unfairly sustaining them because they just want any guns and all guns. And it's an election year. You started in an election year or in an election window. What is your relationship to all of these major political organizations as a Black gun advocate? Is it co-sponsored, co-funded? Does it come from those things? Or is this something that's organic? I guess if I were to rephrase it, why do you care about this issue like so much?
I live in America. my lineage may have been native or indigenous to these lands. I don't know. My lineage may be directly from where you're from. I do not know. I do not know. American history in the Mafa is world history interrupted. And the way that they were able to pull that off is because they had guns and the people didn't. So if I happen to live in a nation that highlights the importance of firearms ownership by the individual to defend against people and governments, I want to take full advantage of that. Maybe I would know my history and my lineage. I would be there still, you know, and I'm not saying me individually knew, but my great, 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 great whatevers. Maybe this would have been different if we had the means to defend from colonialism, imperialism, or enslavement. So that's why it's important. Now, when you isolate it to America, every freedom movement for Black people in America, Harriet Tubman used firearms to potentially protect people. You know, Frederick Douglass was a gun owner. Malcolm X was a gun owner. The Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, gun owner. You know, that stood in opposition to unjust laws. You know, and that's why it's that important to me. I think it's doubly important to me as, you know, a member, potentially as a member of the African, you know, descendants of slavery, or American descendants of slavery. I think it's important because armed people don't get enslaved. I don't trust the positive morality of politicians, the evolution of humans to this extent. Every age or group or time period swears they're the best. When we're all, you know, a few satellites missing and some electricity missing from chaos in world history. Our convenient modern time is a blip in the larger scale of world history. America itself is only a few hundred years old. My great-grandmother's 100 and some odd years old. You know, the pyramids in Kemet, Egypt, are thousands of years old. So this modern comfort zone that we're in, I appreciate it, but I'm also aware of how long world history is. And I want to have the means to always be able to defend myself and my family and potential complete strangers. That's why it's important to me. As far as the NRA has been behind all of the national gun control legislation. They've been in support of it since the 1960s, all of it. There's over 100 million gun owners in America that we're aware of. The NRA on its best year is only have about 4 or 5 million gun owners. They speak to one particular demographic. They're welcome to do that. Black Guns Matter is interested in speaking to all people in all hoods all across America that happen to be gun owners, that are curious about being gun owners. So no, they don't fund, sponsor, co-sponsor. All of our work has been paid for by the people. Every single dollar I've raised and given it away. Over $360,000 in the last few years to do these classes across the country. The NRA has never given us a dime. I wouldn't take it if they gave it to us. They got their own set of issues. You know, I work for the people. I got 300 million bosses in America. I actually, when we started traveling around the globe talking about this, places like South Africa, places like Brazil, that I actually want to make sure that they understand that they have a human right to self-defense with firearms. That should not just be the government. The government individuals are not special beings. They don't have 2 brains and 6 arms and 4 legs. They're humans, susceptible to failure, susceptible to greed, susceptible, as we see in global governmental bodies forever. You know, so That's why these things are important. And all of the other things that are also very important to me, they make up my value system. If you don't have the means to defend your value system, you don't have any. It's like somebody like prepping and saving up all of this food and stuff and supplies for the zombie apocalypse, but they don't have guns or ammo. You're just saving supplies for somebody with guns and ammo to come take them from you. You know, so these are the reasons, based on some of the racist parts of American history where I live, some of the racist parts of world history, especially the continent, especially Africa. Imperialism, they've divvied up Africa like it's a steak, because we generally have been a very peaceful people. Not, that doesn't mean that the Zulu warriors and didn't do their thing, but the great equalizer is firearms, you know? And so for me to protect my community and be a defender of my community, I have to have the potential to be a very violent person to protect my community. What makes me a good man is reserving that violence for the areas where it's needed. And government overreach, robbers, rapists, and unjustified killers, I am perfectly fine with being extremely vigilant and extremely violent with those people.
All right, I understand. Let me ask you, I'm just thinking as we're having this conversation, where do the guns that end up in the bad hands come from? Where are all these guns in the hood coming from? Who gave them to the people? Where do they come from? What's the situation with that?
It's several things. Some, they're just literally dropped off. I have friends that have walked across crates of guns by the government. I believe it's the government. I'm cool if you drop the guns off and I could be there to educate everybody. You won't have the same level of violence. And on top of that, most firearms are stolen from vehicles that are not secured properly. You know, guys go to football stadiums to watch a game, and they leave their gun unlocked up in the glove compartment, in the trunk. It gets broken into. They leave it in their car overnight. It gets broken into. That's where most firearms that are used in unlawful exchanges or shootings come from, stolen. This myth about, oh, they go over like Chicago, they go to Indiana and get the guns, and it's Indiana's fault. Well, if it was just a gun, the same level of gun violence will be happening in Indiana, if that's where all the guns are, you know? So it's a mixture of the stealing, it's a mixture of the owner not being safe and responsible with their guns. When you're a safe and responsible gun owner, you store that firearm properly. They get stolen, they get in the hands of people, and people that are not informed about gun culture, and we know the rest of that story.
All right. I think we're losing light, so let's close it off. There's a few other things I would have wanted to ask you about the Black Panther movement and all of that, but let's leave that for a part two.
Let me turn them on quick.
All right. Maybe, yeah, turn them on. Let's finish it up. We're back.
Boom.
Yeah, we good. So I was gonna ask you, what do you think about the Black Panther movement? It's just like, because that was a movement that we all saw that did try to, like, you know, embrace gun ownership. And I think, I'm not sure whether Malcolm X's Nation of Islam also, I'm saying it's his, but it's not his, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
In that period, it seemed as if there was a lot of Black appreciation for firearms.
Yes.
Do you think that the hostile response from the state was because of that, or is it just folklore at this point?
It was both. I think that it was also bad PR on certain levels. And let me say that, I'm gonna say this with the utmost reverence and respect for those elders that gave their life like a Malcolm X. And the fact that they've given their life to that struggle speaks to their level of commitment that far exceeds all of our own, because we're still here. With that being said, they allowed PR moves and the media to paint them as the bad guy. If I can paint you as the bad guy, anything that I do to you is okay because you're the bad guy.
Mm.
When our Black Guns Matter has a high concentration in Black communities, we're not isolating ourselves from white communities either, though. If mainstream media can make you look like a separatist or a racist, never mind the fact that America and racism exists. If they can package you as looking racist, they can come shoot you as you sleep with your pregnant child, your pregnant woman. Fred Hampton Sr., Chicago. You know, if they can paint you as the bad guy, they can drop a firebomb on your block, and as you run out of the house, they can shoot the women and children and men leaving. Move bombing in Philadelphia, 1983, I think. Black Guns Matter, we deal with everybody. I got white followers, I got Black followers. There's an ability to talk about government tyranny and overreach and saying, hey, I'm doing this in the Black community primarily, but white people are absolutely welcome. If you're about liberty and freedom, cool, come be a part of it. That basic PR mistake made it easier for media, the most effective devil in America, to paint a Malcolm X, to paint the Black Panther Party, who had white members, who had high-ranking women members. They were allowed to paint them as the bad guys. So, middle America that didn't understand and was being fed that mainstream or that corporate narrative, they believed it. You're hard-pressed to find white people defend me and say, Maj isn't racist. Maj is about liberty for all, and I am. But I also know that all gun control is racist. It started to stop Black people from being able to defend themselves, and I'm unapologetic about that. Those two things can exist in the same space, especially when you tie it into American history. And just to be honest about it. And I'm not running around calling for the flaming end of America. I'm saying we got good stuff with us, and we got some horrible shit with us too. You know, and I think most people and certain organizations over time have never taken that approach. They've taken America's done bad things, and they lead specifically with that. You know, I can't talk about Venezuela being a socialist nation, and they used to have, you know, they were a very oil-rich nation. I can't talk about them falling from that powerful status and not include America's economic or political interference. I have to be honest about that. So my honesty, I may not get everybody on board the same speed if I was only talking about one thing, but generally most people are able to say, nah, he keeps it pretty objective. His organization keeps it pretty objective. So because of that, it's much more difficult to paint me or my organization as the bad guy so they don't attack us. Not the same way.
All right, I got you. So I've seen on your Twitter timeline some discussions about solutionary movements, and I think you had a seminar and all of that. What's that about, and how does that tie into the gun activism?
So when you're safe and responsible and a good, upstanding citizen that's working hard for yourself and taking your individual choices and making great decisions that economically, spiritually, socially, and culturally benefit yourself, your family, and your community, that's solution-based. The word revolve, revolution, root word, revolve. The earth, unless you're a flat earther, the earth revolves around the sun. It doesn't go anywhere. It just goes around the sun. I don't want to have the same conversations with my grandchildren 40, 50 years from now. Solutionaries see the problem, identify solutions, apply the solutions. We shouldn't have this conversation anymore because we know the solution. A solutionary lifestyle is when you're thinking about solution-based thought in every aspect of your life. The Solutionary Summit last Saturday in Atlanta, was a panel discussion, 3 panel discussions, a few breakout sessions, and a basic firearm safety class for people on the left, people on the right, independent, libertarian, democratic, Green Party, Tea Party, all in one room. Passionately debating, agreeing, disagreeing, still having libations afterwards, still giving love and support and exchanging with each other, but being extremely passionate on that stage about their positions. And a lot of people disagreed. We as humanity have lost that element. Unless you're just like yourself, like really good at debate and really good at listening and listening to understand and grow and evolve. Now, if it's like a real debate where I'm trying to win, I'm trying to win.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to win in a passionate conversation with someone more as I'm trying to learn their perspective, gain knowledge, and expand. Because now, even if we are on different ends of the spectrum on most things or a lot of things, some areas we still have overlap and we can build in those areas. So that's what the Solutionary Summit was about. It was the inaugural one. It was in Atlanta. Next year, we're going to do it in Miami or Vegas. And we're going to keep bringing powerful minds to sit down, have intellectual and civil discourse, come up with solutions, and let the internet as well as the people in the audience approach that from a different perspective. That is what's necessary. It's tribal, and it doesn't mean that you can't identify with your tribe or your culture, like we were having the other conversation.
Yeah.
No, we can understand and respect different cultures, but it doesn't have to be to the extent where we want to destroy the other side, because we're all in this thing together, as cliche as that sounds.
Yeah.
So that's what the summit is about. That's what the solutionary lifestyle is about in all of the areas of human activity: education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war, whatever, and if we can start shifting the culture to a solution-based, I agree with you here, I disagree with you here, you're still my brother, you're still my sister, we can get more, we can actually push the human condition forward as opposed to regressing, which is what I think we're actually doing now.
I hear you. I wanna shift the gear just a little bit, maybe, and we can wrap it off here. I mean, we've had this intellectual discussion, we discussed the policies, the history, but I have a personal, I guess, thing about energies, because I'm just thinking, guns come with their energy. I remember watching one of the interviews you did. You said when you were 16 and you had one and you put it in your waist, you felt powerful, and, that's an energy, So I just think, what about the energies that these things come with? They're weapons, they're like deadly tools. And my personal feeling is I don't want that kind of energy in my house. But at the same time, I'm thinking, people have intention to do harm to me and kill me and all of that. And I have, a duality, because on the one side, and this also applies to like martial arts or anything like that, because I'm like, I want to learn this stuff so that I can, prevent these toxic situations. And sometimes people will even speak about countries where you've got dictatorships, and then those dictatorships have been in power for 40 years or whatever. Then they'll say, listen, let's get these guns, let's do a revolution, let's get rid of this. And then you think, yeah, but the energies that come with that, once you unleash it, it's so difficult to put back. And if you think about Libya, for example, they removed Gaddafi, and now it's a war zone, and I guess this is not the kind of Socratic type of engagement, but what would you say in response to a person like me who says, isn't the problem really the energies that come with these kind of like tools just being all over the place?
No. When I was 16 and I did that, that was called stupid. That was, I wish somebody would, bravado. That's goofy. That wasn't the gun, that was me being dumb. When you're properly trained, you understand and respect, the tool. I've been sitting here, we've had this great conversation. I have the potential for violence. There's rifles in the back. There's thousands of rounds in here. I'm in a parking lot with hundreds of people around. I have the power of life and death. I'm going to be responsible with that power. Same as butter knives. I could go in one of these restaurants, take the butter knife, and just start stabbing people. hopefully there will be somebody with superior power to stop me from taking life unnecessarily. So no, I get to your point in regards to the untrained mind in regards to energy, but a gun is still an inanimate object. It sits there. The gun is in my appendix right now, not doing anything until I make a decision to do something with it. The problem, I would love to get to a place in the evolution of the human condition where there was literally no need for firearms. I aspire to that place. I do not see us going that way. I want us to. If I could just get police to say, okay, we're not going to do guns, I'd be more in alignment with that. When those things start happening, because it is a tool to defend life. And sometimes to defend life, you may have to take life. I would love for the human condition to be as such where that was not even a thought. I'm not delusional to think that that's where we are. So this inanimate object that I choose to train myself to use properly, like this vehicle that I'm in, it's a house on wheels. If I drive it wrong, I could damage myself, property, other people's property, other people. You have to be patient. You have to take your time. You have to learn about it, just like anything else. When you do that, you'd be surprised how quick it goes from, I wish someone would, to, oh man, I hope nobody does. And I'm going to help de-escalate every situation that I'm in if it happens to pop up around me, even if I'm not the person. I want to de-escalate situations and be the mediator and be the medium for positive change. I have 31 bullets on me right now. I do not want to use any of them unless it is to protect life. That comes with training. And that energy is you. The energy is the knowing the responsibility that comes along with your right. It's like Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. And I think that most humans, especially with training, most are willing to pick up that mantle of those responsibilities that come along with those rights.
I hear you. And I think it sounds fair. I guess my final question would be, I've got this guy who I was supposed to start boxing training with him. And we didn't get to start it now because of the COVID-19 restrictions. I don't want to, I'm on the conservative side of the spectrum in terms of my health and stuff. So I'm like, you know what, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, maybe the skeptics are right, but I don't want to take a chance with it because you never know. You don't want to find out you have an underlying condition under the conditions of something that can kill you for having an underlying condition or whatever, But what he had said to me is, when I train you how to be a boxer, it's going to change you because you're going to start thinking in different ways, So he's like, I'm not going to train you like they do for fitness, where it's just like, oh, this is good for cardio. He was like, to be a true boxer, you need to understand the mindset of a fighter, and he was making the responsibility message as well. And, I thought, look, it's less deadly than owning a weapon, whatever. But I was very uncomfortable with the suggested metamorphosis, to say, listen, there is going to be a shift in how you view things. And I don't know if what I'm trying to ask is, doesn't the same apply to gun training? Because if I'm going to shoot with deadly intent, even if it's for just reason, isn't there a part of me that shifts now because I have accepted the role of a potential, killer, even if it's for just cause, because a soldier never truly ever becomes a civilian again.
100% it is a shift. There's a great book on killing by Robert Colson, if I'm not mistaken. I forget the author's name. But it deals with, from a military perspective, the psychological ramifications of killing. Me personally, I have had friends shot in the head where I've had to try to not let their life liquid leave their brain. It does change you. But the question I ask the people in that regard is, your most loved person, if someone showed up and you were around and you happened to have a firearm and they wanted to rape and kill that person, would you do what was necessary to defend their life? You have to soul search to understand that question. The answer is easy for me. It's very easy. And does that mean that there will not be trauma associated with defending life? Absolutely there will be. But you deal with that after defending life. And the other part of the boxing analogy, I box, I lift weights. I walk away. Most fighters, real fighters, not bravado, egotistical megalomaniacs, most fighters walk away from fights. Because one, I know what I'm actually going to do to you. You don't. As a shooter, these rounds don't go back in the barrel. And there's a potential court case and potential jail time. Unless it's a slam dunk. Clearly, that's the bad guy. Clearly, you saved everybody. Unless it's a slam dunk, there's potential jail time with every shooting. So you better de-escalate all of them. You get into a fight, you can lose. You can lose a gunfight. Best to try to avoid and de-escalate those as much as possible. That's the biggest switch in mentality that people that train guns, train Krav Maga, fighting, whatever, that's actually the biggest switch. And when it is actually time, I have no qualms about being very, very violent. Good men are capable of immense levels of violence. People that are not capable of violence just aren't capable. And people that can't be violent, how can you protect your family? With words? What do you do with a person that does not want to hear your words? They want to rape your loved one. The switch from it's time to walk away, it's time to not even be in a scenario where I may have to walk away. The switch happens from that to this person is an imminent threat to my family's, complete strangers' lives. And I have a moral obligation to be as mentally, physically, and spiritually fit to defend potential strangers, loved ones, myself and family from that actual psychopath. I would rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Look, I think that's a powerful place to leave it and stop the recording. Thanks so much for availing yourself and taking part in this conversation. You know, I don't even really have large YouTube presence, but hopefully the people who watch this will appreciate it and appreciate your candor, your objectivity, and your perspective on gun ownership and how to be ethically, carrying and owning these kind of tools.
Absolutely.